Hey guys, I'm Chris.
And Mike.
And welcome back to this week's No Limits, the Thriller Podcast, the Terminalist Fan Podcast. What are we this week, Mike?
We got the Scot Harvath podcast going on. We got the Mitch Rapp podcast done.
I know, in 1 week we are going to do recordings for all four of our podcasts. A lot of guests, a lot of great content coming your way, including today where we have an amazing, brief, but amazing interview with the one, the only, Jack Carr.
Jack Carr himself. What a week. I could not believe that he was willing to schedule us in, even if just for half an hour, the week of the debut. That's awesome.
I know. I was hoping we would get him maybe in a couple weeks, after the shows come out, and we could maybe dig deeper. I had a lot of In the Blood questions because coming off that podcast, which we loved that book, but save some content for next time. We can have him on when he's a little bit less busy.
Yep.
But yeah, what a crazy week, Mike.
And it was pretty cool. Speaking of In the Blood, that's Chris Pratt's favorite book in the series. It's a great one, and that's pretty cool to hear.
Yeah, no, I think that obviously Terminalist is going to be very good, but this one just came out. It was a little bit different and more gritty. A lot of action. I want to know how many times Chris Pratt has read the entire series. I want to. We should try to have a book club with Chris Pratt on maybe a True Believer. We see if we can get Chris Pratt on to talk about that.
Can you imagine? That'd be pie in the sky.
That'd be funny.
When we started this podcast with the Mitch Rapp series, we were like, pie in the sky. If we could one day talk to Kyle Mills, and then boom, Simon & Schuster made it happen. We started the Scot Harvath podcast. One day be so awesome to get to talk to Brad Thor. Boom, they made it happen. Now we've had Jack Carr on twice, once on the Mitch Rapp pod, now here on Thriller Pod. Just this community of thriller writers, thriller fans, everybody is just fantastic. Absolutely extraordinary group of people.
Yeah, and should we tell them who we're interviewing tomorrow, Mike?
We got George Goodell, the voice of Mitch Rapp, another legend in his category. Now we have the best, or one of the best audiobook narrators in the business, George Goodell, coming on the Mitch Rapp podcast.
Stay tuned for all our good content. If you haven't gone and watched the Terminalist TV show, I don't know what rock you've been under, but go binge it now, all 8 hours, actually 8+ hours. Some of those episodes are over an hour. Go pick up In the Blood if you haven't listened to that. But yeah, we hope you enjoy this interview with Jack. We're just going to kick it right off. And I just want to say, congrats to you, not only on this week, this year. It's the year of Jack Carr. You were pretty famous when we had you on last time, but now you're a whole nother level of famous. We're so happy to have you here today. We definitely want to talk to you about the show. We also hope we can ask you a few questions about In the Blood, because what a banging book. This show is really good, but that book was so good. So we would definitely want to talk to you about that. But yeah, how's your week going?
Everything's great. Yeah, I think it's In the Blood is Chris Pratt's favorite as well. He
really
he nice. It as soon as he was texting me throughout as he was reading it, but when he finished it, he FaceTimed me, and it's I shouldn't say it. It might be. It is his favorite of all of them. And kind of my informal polling of just comments and reviews and that sort of thing. I think it's a lot of people's favorite one, which at book 5 is interesting. You kind of, I don't know, I don't really think about it too much, but it ended up being the most action-packed of all the books. Got a really powerful chapter that's my favorite that I've ever written, in chapter 3, which is just Reece talking to Caroline Hastings, the matriarch of the Hastings family, and her passing on some wisdom to him. I think that's probably my favorite chapter I've ever written, other than maybe the last, the epilogue in the first novel, in the Terminalist, which was kind of like a burial at sea for the list and for the picture. So that one was pretty powerful to write. I remember exactly where I was when I wrote it. But yeah, that chapter 3 really meant a lot to me for some reason. And I didn't know that when I had the outline that it would mean so much. It wasn't like chapter 3, this one's going to be powerful. It's going to be, there's none of that. It was just conversation, boom, boom, boom. But it really ended up being a powerful conversation, very emotional. But yeah, people are really loving In the Blood, and I'm glad that Chris likes it, because maybe that means that we'll do all these other ones to get to it. So we'll see.
Yes. We want to see that. We really, really want to see that. But before we get there, we got to cover True Believer, Savage Son, because damn, I really want to see those as well. Do you have any news or breadcrumbs you could drop us about what's next?
Well, I just checked some texts right there, and we'll see. But I'm working on the outline. I shouldn't say working. I have an outline that's outlines are for me anyway, are always in continual development, even after I jump into the actual narrative, if it's an outline for a book, because then I'll go back and morph that outline, add things to it that I discover as I write the book. A lot of times I discover things through conversations. So through writing the dialogue that I didn't know at the outset, because I'll have like a list of characters and I'll say, let's say Joe Smith is a Secret Service agent and he's a bad guy. But I won't really get to know him until he interacts with other characters, most of the time through dialogue, through conversation. And then sometimes that will impact the outline, and I'll go back just so I can have a visual representation of where things are and where they're going. But True Believer will be an interesting one, because when you take something and you adapt it to film, now you're telling a story through a different medium. You're telling it through a visual medium, which means things change, because you can't, there's no internal dialogue. You can't say what a character is thinking, in most cases, unless you have some sort of a voiceover. Every now and again, like in Magnum PI, we had a little bit of that. But you can't have a running internal monologue like you can essentially in a novel when you're doing it on the screen. So things change. But for True Believer in particular, I mean, things were moving towards a Russian invasion of Ukraine in that book. And that came out in 2019. I started writing it at the end of the summer, early fall of 2016. So before I'd even submitted the first book to Simon & Schuster, because I always knew I was going to write 2 for sure, because of the Grisham story about him writing A Time to Kill and not being able to give that away. And then writing The Firm and that taking off. And then I think A Time to Kill is arguably one of his best works. Right. And then they went back, republished that, make the movie with Matthew McConaughey. And so I had that in my mind, as okay, both of them don't hit, then maybe I'll reevaluate some choices here or fall back on some contingency plans, but I don't want to do that. So all of me went into both of those, but there'll be some changes that have to be made now that Russia actually did invade Ukraine. It worked geographically with the novel, going across the Atlantic, going to Mozambique, up to Morocco, over to Ukraine. Like it just works kind of, geographically it works. And then with the backgrounds of the characters, Russia, tie to the 80s, like there's all these things that worked. And now without that in place, I need to figure there's a little gap in my outline where I just say I need to figure out some geopolitical type of an event or a event that things are moving towards that makes sense. Because obviously that one made sense because it actually happened. But I need to figure out something else that might actually happen, type of a thing that still works with the storyline. So that's the part on the True Believer outline for the series, and I have it broken into 8 episodes that I'm working on right now.
This might be a ways off, but casting, would you have any say in a Rafe Hastings, a Freddie Strain? Because I'd imagine you have a pretty clear picture of what these guys look like, and the whole Hastings crew.
I do, and I'm going to keep all that close hold, because as soon as you say
sounds good,
you thought of, then it's like, oh, they didn't get that person, and
right, true, fair enough.
Can they get Adrian Gardanis though?
We'll see if he comes back from the dead. You never know these days. He needs to work on accent skills. He's not a pretty inept assassin.
How did Gordo miss his shot? I mean, how?
Well, I made sure that I talked to Chris and let him know when we were blocking that scene that, hey, you should make believe, buddy. Just don't go get in a big head here. This would go down a little differently in real life. So, but that was so fun to do. It was so much fun to do that scene. It was a great time.
You might have been distracted by the bucatini. It just smells so good.
There you go. You guys have been watching. You guys have been paying attention.
Yeah. Oh yes.
It was a great time. I loved that Land Cruiser. The guys that did the mobility, George Sack, who's a legend in kind of mobility and circles in Hollywood. Him and his crew wanted to do this because they were fans of the book and because they were Land Cruiser fans. And so they wanted to create the Land Cruiser that James Reece drives in the book, and they wanted to bring that to the screen. So they fought to get in here, and it was, man, that was cool to film that scene. And now I have that Land Cruiser outside. So when they did the crash, what was amazing, nothing wrong with the Land Cruiser. Like bend something back into place a little bit, but essentially nothing to the Land Cruiser. And that other car that I was in, destroyed. Done. Yeah. And it wasn't even a very hard hit. I mean, it looks like not too hard of a hit, but when I saw it, I was like, oh, dang. I'm glad they put my stunt in there. I was kind of like, let me do it. I can do it. And they're like, no. But it was cool. I had the guy that doubled me in that. He also doubled Mel Gibson in Lethal Weapon. And he jumped off the tower, handcuffed to the guy. Remember in that scene in Lethal Weapon?
Oh, that's awesome.
The guy that doubled Mel doubled me in this scene. So that was really cool because that was such an impactful movie to me. I think it's a fantastic film. Absolutely love it. And so when I found out that guy was doubling me, I was overjoyed. I was like starstruck. Pretty cool.
So what I heard there was Mel Gibson is going to be Papa Hastings.
Yeah.
No. Never mind. Never mind.
So speaking of being on set, what was that your best moment on set? Or I'm sure all of them, were great. What was your favorite moment on set?
I have a favorite. Maybe my first time setting foot on the lot because it was the tunnel scene. Okay. So before I got there, they'd filmed some of the homecoming stuff, that sort of a thing. But I was there on set, and it was like our SEAL reunion. And the COVID police were losing their minds because I got there and we're like, "What's up, brother? I haven't seen you since Iraq." And one of the guys there was with me in Iraq the last deployment, and so we had all these SEALs on set, and it was a blast, and it was so much fun to see everything come to life, but also I got to see how good everyone is at their jobs, whether they're, it doesn't matter what they're doing, whether they're doing the hair and makeup, or they're doing craft food services, or they're a stuntman, or they're whatever it is, they are so good. And my takeaway was that it was a lot like a military operation, because in the military, you got to feed the troops. So that's craft food services. You have a commanding officer, that's Antoine Fuqua at the top. You have a troop commander or a platoon commander, that's Chris Pratt right here, who actually is playing a platoon commander, troop commander in the show. You have your mobility people in your platoon in the SEAL teams. You have a mobility crew that's doing your routes to and from target, making sure the vehicles are all set, they're gassed up, the 50 cal or whatever, it's all ready to rock. So they're in charge of that. You have an explosives guy on set because we had an explosion in those tunnels. And you have a breacher who needs to figure out how to get through walls, through doors, windows, whatever it is. So you have that breacher. You have your armorer in the SEAL teams. So you get back and you kind of turn in your weapon, and they inventory it each month and that sort of a thing. We had that same thing on set. You had that armorer that was inventorying those weapons from the actors as they come back. So there were a lot of similarities to a SEAL team, and obviously having SEALs on set, I felt right at home. So that was special. The final scene with Chris and Taylor Kitsch was emotional for everyone. So that was really cool to see that being filmed. There was so much. The cameos was great. The Sicario scene, seeing that come to life. Having to figure out how to film and getting Amazon's backing eventually to do the gutting scene that most people thought we wouldn't film. If I was to poll all the questions or comments, I should say, on social media, most people, when I announced this was going to be a series, they immediately went negative and was like, Amazon will never let you do the gutting scene. And, they're right.
And they did.
They were nervous, but, we got it in there. And so it's, I don't know. Every moment was special, but it was special because of the people. And the trust that we had from the very beginning with me and Chris and Antoine, and then bringing on David DiGilio as the showrunner, and really having those guys trust Jared Shaw, who's a SEAL buddy of mine that was on set every day. He was the person that gave the book to Chris Pratt. He's there every day as an actor playing Boozer. He's also there as a producer and a technical advisor. Our other buddy, Ray Mendoza, buddy from the SEAL teams, has War Office Productions. He's there every day. He was did the technical advising for Lone Survivor, Peter Berg, and he also was in Act of Valor. And then Max Adams, former Army Ranger, who was a second unit director, producer, and a writer on the show. And so those three guys there every day, and then having the trust of Antoine and the showrunner and Pratt, it made for a really special experience. And so many people came up to me on set and said that they've been on hundreds of movie sets and they've never felt as at home and in such a positive, encouraging environment as they were on this set. And they didn't have to track me down, but they tracked me down. So many people said something almost exactly like that, or something very similar to that. And I got that every time I was on set. So that was pretty cool.
Well, it definitely comes through in there's just the quality of the show, and you could tell obviously Chris cares about it, you care about it, but from the top down, everyone sort of cared about this, and it just shows. It's been amazing to watch. I'm really happy that Amazon did this and gave you this opportunity. So
Yeah, I'm fired up. And of course, there are differences. And I have this podcast now. Hey, the Danger Close podcast, and it dropped today. First 2 episodes dropped today, and it's me, the showrunner, and Jared Shaw sitting down together.
Can't wait to listen.
Fantastic first 2 episodes. That's another accomplishment in 2022 here. The second.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. It was crazy. So we did that. But now I have some lessons on that going forward. Like we do it for True Believer. I think we give away some spoilers earlier on for later episodes because we're just excited to be talking to each other because we have such fun when we do it. But we should have done it in a way that if you were watched us, or if you haven't watched an episode yet, or sure, if you have, like if you watched episode 1, then you can listen to the podcast episode and not have spoilers for episode 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
That's been tough for us.
Yeah, it's been really hard.
Yeah.
We're trying to cover not just every book. So we covered Terminalist and In the Blood, but we couldn't talk all that much about the events in between because we didn't cover them yet. And now we're reviewing every episode. We're the Terminalist fan podcast.
Awesome. Yeah, I know you guys had that. That was awesome. I listened to the first one of the preview. I forget what I listened to. Whatever the first one was, maybe. But yeah, awesome.
Well, we just had Chris Albanese on, who I believe you know from the Crew Reviews.
Yeah, I saw that he was on. I saw that popped up. I didn't get a chance to listen yet, though.
Yeah, he went through episode 1 and 2 with me, and we just had a blast breaking it down.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. So yeah, we do the same thing. But we talk like, some behind the scenes stuff, or like, why was the decision made to do X, Y, or Z, or to cut something that we did film? We talk a lot about that because so much was left on the cutting room floor that I loved. But like Stephen King says, you got to kill your babies sometime.
Yes.
And that's just how it goes. But we talk about that, like why things were different, why things were cut, some fun stuff from stories from the sets, some insights into all parts of the process. So we had a great time doing that. So that's out now, the Terminalist podcast. That was fun.
Yeah, check that out. Episode 1 and 2 are awesome.
Oh, thank you.
I guess speaking of veering from the book, I feel like episodes 5 and 6 sort of veer the most from the book. Can you give us any input in how much you had in changing those scenes in episodes 5 and 6?
Yeah, so I was involved in every part of the process, but I was learning.
Right.
So that first, like the pilot episode, it was just me and David Agilio. That's it. And I was there just learning, advising, but really learning, really soaking it all in, helping him a little bit here and there, but really he's mentoring me along. And then go over those notes with Chris and with Antoine Fuqua. And then the 3 of them took that pilot episode and they walk it around to Netflix, to Amazon, to HBO, Showtime, Hulu, Apple. And ended up in a bidding war between Netflix and Amazon is the one that got it. Thank goodness. I think it was the right place, the right home for it. So there's that piece. And so that's my first time kind of learning about why things need to change visually. And also I'd accepted well ahead of time that, hey, if anyone ever makes this into a show, like, hey, if Michael Bay is going to make this thing and wants to put some robots from outer space in there, guess what's going in? Robots from outer space. But there's a lot of trust involved. So when I put this over to Antoine and to Chris, I'm putting it in these guys' hands because I trust them. And for all of us, what was important from the very beginning, to include the showrunner, was to stay grounded in the foundational elements of the novel, knowing that it's going to change. And I would always go back and think about First Blood and think about David Morrell's novel that came out in May of 1972, just turned 50 years old last May. And it's never been out of print since. Amazing novel, moves the genre forward. And then we have the movie in 1983 with Sylvester Stallone. Very different, but
right.
So I always had that in mind. Like, you can have 2 things that are different, that are connected to one another, and both be awesome. So that's the attitude that I took into it. And also, I'm a student. I'm always a student. In the SEAL teams, I was always a student of warfare, always learning, always adapting. Same thing here. I want my next book to be better than this last one. I want the next sentence to be better than the one right before that. I want to move the genre forward each and every time, even if it's just by a degree. That's always something that I'm thinking about. And I know that people are never going to get the time back that they spend watching the series, listening to the audiobook by Ray Porter, reading the novel, following me on Instagram and reading a post. They're never getting that time back. So they've trusted me with that time, and I'm going to do my best to deliver on that, and to be is something I take very, very seriously. So the changes, and if you watch it again, I think we talk about this in the podcast. like some of these nods, like episode 5. Well, in the sniper scene, guess what? It's not. Oh, it's not a G-Wagon. Well, why is it not?
True.
Well, because if you roll a G-Wagon, guess what happens? It goes over on its side most of the time, and it slides just because of the design. I didn't know that when I wrote the book, but now I know it from talking to the stunt people. So we had to make it Porsche Cayenne. Cool. We had to flip that thing, and it has this this crazy Anyway, they flip it, and it's crazy how they do it. There's actually a guy in it driving, and I wasn't there for that part of it. I wish I was, but and that doesn't start. And for a while, we had that as the start of the series, but ended up not really working there, and it worked in the novel, but didn't work really in the show. There was a better way to start it. So I just went in wanting to make the best show possible, knowing that hey, we have this trust together, and it's going to stay grounded in the foundation of the book and in the realities of modern combat as much as we possibly can with these authentic touch points as we move forward. And we broke a lot of rules. I mean, we broke a lot of rules. I learned about screenwriting, and I learned about these certain rules, the do's and the don'ts of screenwriting. And we broke a lot of rules in this, and Amazon had to be on board with that. And they did. They got on board with these changes. There was a very different ending that Amazon had in mind. There was not the getting things like that. So, but it takes, it's a team, and ultimately it's all based upon trust. And Amazon sided with us every single time. And, but they took a risk. They took a big risk on a lot of these things, even to include that first episode and the ending of the first episode. So there's a lot of things that we did that are not quote unquote normal or following the rules of screenwriting or show running or developing a series. So, so the changes in the last couple episodes, yes, I mean there are changes throughout. Different people get killed in similar ways, but it's a different character. The characters that don't exist in the book that are in the series. And if someone's going through and with the book and they're just going to sit there and watch it and be like, that's different. Oh, I hate this. This is different. If that's your metric,
they're not going to have a good time.
8 hours watching this. Dude, I spend it doing something else. Do something more productive. Because it's not the same. There are changes, and I've tried to be so upfront with that on social channels or interviews or engagement, whatever. But for whatever reason, just some people's metric is if there's any changes, it's horrible. Okay, that's fine. But there are changes. There will be changes.
That's a perfect answer.
And you get to decide, in life, you get to decide how you're going to sit down and watch something. Are you going to enjoy it for what it is, or are you going to try to pick out everything that was different and then hate it because it was different? Or hey, if someone's fingers on a trigger over here, or hey, why don't they have suppressors on the rifles? Well, we had suppressors on them, but then it looks so much cooler without. So there's some Hollywood stuff in there. So those came off, I think, like an hour before shooting in those tunnels, those suppressors, just for that visual, that impactful visual in those tunnels, which are kind of meant to be there to map out the mind and the brain. These have these pathways and having these flashes. If you'll notice, there's flashes in different parts of the show as well. So a lot of thought went into those changes. They weren't just like, we're going to change this and make it better. No, we're changing things because we're telling a story visually right now. And
change can be good.
Yeah. So there's an EFP. So that EFP that goes off, well, in the book, it kills a different person. It's in New York. Here it's in San Francisco, and it's still an EFP. But if you notice the vehicle, well, there's the G-Wagon right there. So these little things like that are in there, or at the ambush scene in the book, and Reece is up there, and these guys get out of the vehicles, and he recognizes Freddie Strain, and he doesn't clack off that ambush. Well, where's that in the series? Well, there's in episode 6, he's on the top of this, kind of perched in this rock, and he leaves a bullet behind, leaving this message like, yeah, I could have taken this shot.
He didn't take it. Yep.
But you have to be thoughtful as you watch, instead of saying, oh, that stuff wasn't in the book, hate it. Well, if you're watching with a kind of an eye, like looking for some of these things and realizing that, hey, there are these touch points, even though it's different. Well, that was the touch point for that scene. So each and every one of those changes has something like that, which was for me really cool, because there's surprises for people who have read the book. And then if you go the other way and you watch it first and then you get the book, there's surprises going the other way. It's not like, and here we come to the point where he kills so-and-so. Oh, here he comes at the time of so-and-so. Okay, I just watched a book in visual form, and yeah, it was cool, But I do really love the changes. And if I didn't like it, I would just say, hey, we really screwed this up, and next time we'll try and do better if Amazon gives us another shot. But no, that's not how I feel about it.
Definitely not.
You don't need to say that. Like you were saying, trust was so important from Amazon Studios and you having trust in Antoine and the showrunner. Well, you've just built that trust with the fans, whether they're readers or just fans of the show. I feel like we know we can trust the crew, and whatever you throw at us is going to deliver. And almost everything in the book that I said, hey, I know it's going to be changed, but I really hope this thing happens, or there's at least a nod to this thing. All of those beats were hitting. Like one thing Chris and I said we needed is we've got to see the drawing, the family drawing, and a list has to be written on the back. And of course, all those touch points were just hit on. What happened to the drawing? Does anybody have it? I feel like that should be in a museum. Or is it in the ocean?
It's in the other room.
Oh, no
nice.
Way.
That's
Great.
cool.
But truth be told, there was more than one.
Okay.
Chris has to put it in the water, so we had to do that. It was windy out there. Everybody's getting seasick. I was with the director on shore because I had something else. What did I have to do that morning? Somehow I didn't get on the boats, and now I'm so glad I did not get on these boats out there because everyone was sick, and I was set up on the beach with my screen and the director right there, and that was a much more comfortable place to watch than being on the boats out there with Taylor and Chris. But everybody was so seasick that day. But yeah, point being, there are the changes. There's some other ones in there that I mean, there are a bunch of them, but those nods to the novel and to that foundation, if you're really watching it like that, then they're there. They're there.
Definitely.
Just to change the tune for a minute, and I say tune on purpose, that opening song is awesome. How did the collaboration with Mississippi Twilight come about?
Yeah, we have an amazing person who did the music, and she was incredible. And I'm not sure if those songs, we had 3 options that came in, and we all got them at the same time, the executive producers, and we got them. I forget what day it was, but we got them. It was this last fall, and we thought about them, and we listened to them over and over, and kind of slept on them. And I think but we all kept coming back to that one. I mean, it was like the problem of having too many great choices. Like any one of them would have been awesome. So it's really, you're just trying to pick that one that is just the slightest bit better or has a little bit more connection with the visuals or with the theme of the show or with the characters or with the emotions behind the characters or the show in and of itself. And we kept going back to Trigger. Yeah. So that was
great choice.
Yeah. But they all would have been great. That's the tough part. It's like, I think it was like 3 or 4 days. We all kind of slept on them, maybe 3. And we all came to that same thing. No one was like, it has to be this, or I think this one's better. That was, we all realized these are great, but we all kept coming back to Trigger.
That's awesome. It came out great. Everything about the project, we're over the moon about it. And we can't wait to keep listening to the real Terminalist podcast with you. And we'll be the fan companion podcast, giving a fan and reader's perspective.
I love it.
But before we let you go, since you built up such a good friendship with Antoine and Chris, if you were going to go downrange with these guys, what would their call signs be?
Ooh, what would their call signs be? I'm not going to say because the first I had things that popped right into my mind, and I don't want to have to go back and text you guys and say, can we edit that out? I don't want anyone to take
we're leaving it.
Call signs that came immediately to mind, but for risk of them not coming off in the way I intend, I'll keep those close hold.
Fair.
Sounds good. All right, maybe when you're a little less busy, we can get you back on to talk In the Blood, because we have some questions about Alice.
Oh yeah. I'll say before we go, I would be shocked if Alice did not exist, and if she did not exist in a way that is almost exactly the way I described in the novel.
Oh, definitely. Love it. I call one thing in the show when Katie's on the phone, she's doing her journaling. The subtitles say that the person she's on the phone with is named Alice. Is that a deep cut? Or is that a coincidence?
I did not see it. That must be a coincidence, but maybe not. Sometimes
maybe not.
These creators out there that are putting those together, sometimes they slide these things in like that. Yeah. That's it was on the subtitle on a trailer teaser type thing, or in the actual show.
No, every episode when Katie's on the phone trying to do her journalist and talking to a friend trying to get info who's looking stuff up, it says that's Alice on the other end of the line. Maybe Alice put herself in there.
Good catch. Amazing. I mean, yeah, on that Terminalist podcast we're doing, I'm learning things like that all the time. That's why I'm having such a good time sitting down with these guys and talking, because we're all learning new things that we didn't know over the past couple of years putting this together.
Jack, thanks so much. It was a blast talking to you.
Thank you guys. Appreciate everything. You guys take care out there.
Thanks, Jack.
Congrats on a big year.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, guys, that was an awesome interview. Hopefully we can get Jack back on to talk a little bit more about Alice. I definitely agree with him. I think that Alice, it does exist, and it may even exist exactly how he describes her. And that's funny that he didn't know that when you watch the subtitles, Katie's calling Alice. That's a nice little pickup by you there, Mike. I saw it too, but I didn't put two and two together.
I saw it and it popped into my mind. I'm like, oh, that would be a funny like meta joke. Like that's a deep cut right there if that's the case.
Right.
And then I go, wait, did she have any friends in the book? Like, did she work with any other journalists? So I searched every one of the books. So no, Katie had no friends named Alice or anything. Someone, can you imagine? This would be epic. Can you imagine if one of the like digital engineers or one of the audio technicians slipped that in, having read In the Blood? That would be so
that would
funny.
have been a nice little Easter egg. That's a nice little Easter egg. Yeah.
It's probably just a
or accidental
random. Yeah.
No, it's funny, like, because I listen to a lot of these like companion podcasts with shows, and they pick up on way more things than, you know, even the person creating it like probably even knows. And you'll be amazed at how many either completely coincidental Easter eggs there are that just, you know, but it probably is what you say. It's like someone who was tangentially a part of this had to make that decision and read these books and was like, oh, that'd be a nice name to throw in. She was such a big character in the last book. So yeah, well, great time talking to Jack.
Absolutely. If you want more content of him talking about behind the scenes, I know he got to plug it, but I want to plug it again. Jack just recently released the Terminalist podcast. We're the fan companion podcast, so we'll be coming at you with a fan's perspective, bringing on different voices to go through the episodes. But if you want a behind-the-scenes look, it's Jack, the showrunner, David DiGilio, and Jared Shaw, who plays Boozer, and the former SEAL, who is an executive producer and advisor as well. They sit down and talk episode by episode about creating it from a behind-the-scenes standpoint. So congrats to Jack. What a year for him. We got books, we got movies, we got double podcasts. Just, he's absolutely crushing it with the Jack Carr brand.
Yes, yes. We are going to be transitioning a little bit to our next big event on our calendar, The Gray Man. So go read The Gray Man. Get ready for the mid-July release in theaters. And then I think it hits Netflix like a week or two later, right, Mike?
I think, yeah, the 15th is the limited theatrical release, and the 22nd is the full Netflix release. So I'd imagine the week of the 22nd, a whole lot of people are going to be catching that film. So we hope to have covered the book by then and be right in the midst of all our coverage, everything about the movie. We'll do a lead up to it, breaking down the trailers and all the other posts that we've seen, looking for some Easter eggs, and hopefully, you never know, we might get Mark Rainey on. So come back, stay tuned, subscribe to No Limits, the Thriller podcast, this feed right here. In just a month or so, we will be No Limits, the Gray Man fan podcast.
There it is. Also, I should plug it here as well. Go check out our other podcast, the Scot Harvath podcast. We just did Rising Tiger.
We're covering all the Scot Harvath books in order, one at a time. And hopefully, Brad did hint in our recent interview, one day we will be covering a Brad Thor movie and television production starring Scot Harvath.
That sounds good.
And not to mention, while we're at it, season 1, 100 plus hours of episodes and content reviewing every book by Vince Flynn and Kyle Mills in the Mitch Rapp series. And you betcha, in September, we are covering Oath of Loyalty, the next book in the series, and we hope to have Kyle Mills back on the pod to spoil it with us.
Still going to be a busy, busy summer, Mike. Busy summer.
Oh, yeah.
All right. We need to thank our patrons, our special operator, Sherry F., our special agents, Daryl, Kevin, George, Matt, Don, Dennis, Peggy, Catherine, Ray, Bridget, Jeff, and Mark. Please subscribe, rate, and review on either Apple or Spotify. You can find us at thrillerpod.com or on Twitter and Instagram at thrillerpodcast. And as always, win the fight.